FinBiz 2030 is one of the most exciting projects that One Young World community has had a chance to be involved with. The idea sprang out of the involvement of the Institute of Chartered Accountants worldwide, being engaged with One Young World, running competitions every year to find the very best, most socially minded chartered accountants from all of their offices around the world. And the notion that given so many people in the age group, that means usually under 30, are concerned to see their businesses supporting and doing something to contribute to the effort of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
The purpose of this event is to raise awareness of the SDGs and, most importantly, the role of chartered accountants in finance and business, and in particular the opportunity to tackle the SDGs and taking a leading position to address them. The delegates here today are responding really well to the challenges and the conversations that are taking place, and I very much look forward to an action plan. We want to see doers. We don't want this to be another talking show. Obviously, the talking is necessary at the beginning to stimulate the debate, but the value of this session will be on the specific actions that these leaders will commit to taking forward to improve things in South Africa.
And this one in Johannesburg is the second one in the world. It's exciting to be here. But I would emphasize, having just returned from the World Economic Forum at Davos, that the great hope of the world in many respects at the moment is the continent of Africa.
It's become increasingly apparent how business leaders are required and expected to do so much more. If not from a moral perspective, then at least from a practical one, where we cannot expect businesses to thrive in failing societies. The Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN are not a nice to have, they're an absolute must on the agenda, and I look forward to seeing what some of South Africa's brightest young minds come up with as we launch the task force for FinBiz 2030 in South Africa.
The difference that can be made on the ground by financial businesses, because the change has to be done and it has to come quickly, and quite frankly, can we just move on with this for a new consensus, a new cooperation, and get on with it. And here we look to the young leaders in those companies to get on with it and effect the change that is required. And I am not hopeful, I am confident that this work will be done.
So I think the only thing that we need to make this happen is action. I think we've had a lot of talk, there's a lot of sort of reading about this, there's a lot of conferences about this, but we need someone to actually do, or we need people to take action. And that's going to be the one thing that that will set FinBiz apart from any other forum, is that if we can get this right and take action and bring these policies and procedures into implementation, I think that's one thing that's going to set everything apart, and that's what we critically need.
Ask yourself, if not now, then when? If not me, then who? South Africa's had some really big and exciting wins last year, but let's learn to set the bar where it really matters.
This is a fantastic initiative and it's already delivering. And that's the business of the day, delivery.
My name is Simonetta Juricic, Chartered Accountant and One Young World Ambassador, and part of the FinBiz 2030 Task Force. We are committed to solving SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. With our economy forecast to shrink by record amounts, never before has the promotion of economic growth been more critical in the history of South Africa. The Decent Work and Economic Growth Task Force has committed to relentlessly working towards achieving SDG 8 by adopting a two-part approach. 1. Supporting small business by pairing owners with skilled financial professionals who will provide ongoing mentorship during the growth phase of the business's cycle. And 2. Promoting South Africa as a leading global business services location, both locally and internationally, with a focus on creating jobs for our unemployed, semi-skilled and economically or geographically disadvantaged citizens.
My name is Lisa Libber. I'm a chartered accountant and part of the FinBiz 2030 Task Force. I'm a project lead for SDG 10, Reduced Inequalities. Inequality within and among nations continues to be a significant concern. Greater emphasis needs to be placed on reducing inequalities in income, as well as those based on other factors, including gender, race, religion, education, and many more.
My name is Stephen Story. I'm a chartered accountant and part of the FinBiz 2030 task force. Our team is committed to solving for SDG 13, climate action. We often hear that South Africa isn't ready to have climate action as a primary focus. It is this mentality that we will change.
I'm Didi Ntleletape. I'm a One Young World ambassador and part of the FinBiz 2030 task force. I'm the project lead for SDG 4, quality education. By providing quality education, we can broaden the opportunities that will curb unemployment through exposure and learning that will create employment in formal and less traditional sectors other than your conventional 9-to-5, relieving the burden to government. We intend on developing and implementing support programs that will help improve education, especially to those who don't have the means.
It is no longer negotiable for South African business leaders to maintain tunnel vision and focus only on solving their business's problems. South Africa is effectively in business rescue, and no business can win if South Africa loses.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the second edition of our FinBiz 2030 Building Resilience series. Today we'll be focusing on courage in adversity. My name is Lal Malander, and alongside me is the radiant Mandy Muchnik, and we're both One Young World ambassadors, chartered accountants, and co-chairs of the FinBiz 2030 South African Task Force. Now Mandy, I'm super excited to get things started tonight. But first, let me welcome the nearly 4,000 people we have joining us tonight from 66 countries.
Thank you so much, Lal. It's amazing to be here and to be joined by so many people from around the world. I think no matter where you're sitting tonight, the one thing that we all have in common, particularly as young people, is that the odds really feel stacked up against us at the moment. We've all felt some form of displacement, be it in our personal lives, our professional lives, or even both. But it is becoming increasingly apparent that the world's workforce needs to be ready to rebuild with optimism and to truly lead with resilience. So that's why we're here tonight to talk about courage in adversity, and we hope that after you hear from our power panel tonight, that you walk away with a few practical tools and a reinstilled sense of confidence in navigating the time ahead.
Now, we've said that this is a series brought to you by FinBiz 2030, but for those of you who are not familiar, FinBiz 2030 is a joint initiative between One Young World and chartered accountants worldwide, and we aim to go global. We've launched in London in the UK, we've also launched in Johannesburg here in South Africa, and we plan to launch in many more cities to come. So what does that mean? For FinBiz 2030, our aim is to mobilize the finance and business community to act to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals as set by the United Nations. And we plan to do this all by 2030.
Now, because FinBiz and One Young World are all about action, we will be showing you two initiatives tonight that are addressing important needs in our communities. Please get involved in any way you can by either sharing the initiatives on social media or donating where you are able to. I think that our generation will forever be judged on what we do during this time. So join us in being part of the ones that responded. On a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started, for anyone streaming, if you are having trouble, please check the settings at the bottom right hand of your screen and feel free to load the resolution. You'll also find the chat function there. Feel free to say hi and post any questions you have, which we'll hopefully get to later tonight. And we'd love to hear from you tonight, so if you are posting on social media, whether it's screenshots, quotes, or key learnings, please remember to hashtag FinBiz2030 and tag @OneYoungWorld and Chartered Accountants Worldwide.
Now, if you are tuned in for the first episode in this series, you'll know that our team in the UK put on a stellar performance, and Mandy, we have some big shoes to fill. But I am excited to announce that the date for our next webinar has been set. So please look out for it on the 3rd of September. The topic for that would be equality, diversity, and opportunity. And I hope to see you there.
Now, without any further delay, we're really excited to welcome our first guest tonight, all the way from the UK, but we can have a little bit of local pride because she is originally from South Africa. She's one of my absolute favorite people in the whole wide world, and she has changed thousands of people's lives by creating One Young World, a platform for young people's voices to be heard, and most importantly, for their work to be elevated and supported by some of the best known CEOs and global leaders. Kate, it's amazing to have you here with us tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you, Mandy. It's an honor to be here as always. It really is. Well done, Chartered Accountants Worldwide, again, on this fabulous initiative. And well done, Seika. My heart's with you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Well, everyone's really excited to hear from you tonight and what it really takes to be courageous in this time, and the specific role that the finance and business role in South Africa has to play. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay. I was interested to see the choice of the word courage. And I think there is an important distinction, although I'm mindful of the fact that we are talking to 66 countries where English is not necessarily mother tongue. So forgive me for this distinction. But I think as something that is terribly important here, as emphasized in the introduction videos and what Mandy had to say, the whole One Young World movement is all about less talk and more action, is all about not standing on your soapbox and then forgetting what you said. It's all about what you do and talk about it afterwards and not the other way around. So action is absolutely critical. And I think there are two English words that we could use here. Sometimes you do something, and I think particularly of people in situations of physical danger, where someone says, oh, you were so brave. And that is a kind of amazing human force that seems quite often, bravery seems to emerge without thought. You just acted on instinct and saved a life or did something you had to do. Where courage seems to me to mean a longer form thing. And certainly courage is not a word that we would use often in the context of business. And yet, as we look at the way the world stands today in the pandemic, we either get business going and have the courage so to do and do whatever we're going to have to do with business, or things are going to be a hell of a lot worse than we've ever imagined. So let's talk about the issues of courage in business. I've spoken to some of you several times at Chartered Accountants Worldwide, all over the world, about the issues regarding your role as Chartered Accountants Worldwide in addressing the great virus of corruption. So not to go over that again, but to look at what courage in business actually means. And I think it's quite a difficult thing. These days in the UK, as I think in the United States and probably in South Africa following state capture, courage in business sort of focuses on whistleblowing, and that does take courage. But whether it's whistleblowing or any other form of courage in business, what you're talking about is someone who looks at a situation and goes, this could be different, this could be better, I could do this better, I and my team could do a different thing and it would be much better. But in all of these potential statements, an element of risk is clearly present. It's what I could do. It's what I might do. It's what should happen or could happen if I did this thing. I am taking a risk. Taking a risk in business quite often requires courage. There are some buccaneering entrepreneurs around the world who take enormous risks. And here, I guess one thinks of the brilliant Elon Musk, who takes a hell of a lot of risks. But for most people in business, and I suggest too for chartered accountants, courage emerges in a measured because you're accountants, a measured, careful form, but it's important. So for all of us in business, there comes a question of what risk do you need to face to make this difference, to make this big change? And that kind of courage, I always think, is less an intellectual pursuit than it's actually a gut thing, because you do have to draw very deep. I found at the start of the crisis, it was so difficult because when we started this year, One Young World was having potentially its most stable financial situation that it's ever had after some very difficult years in 2015, 2016. And with so many plans for the year to do 5 times more stuff at the center level than we've ever done before. And then came the pandemic. And then, do you cancel the summit? Do you move the summit? Germany didn't want us to move the summit initially because everybody was hoping for the best, which never came. We were waiting to see what the Olympics would do. They got postponed. And everything, it was like dominoes. And you do really get to a point of going, it's not even a question of taking risk. It's just a question of clinging on. But we have young leaders in our community who are doing exactly what Mandy said and saying, what we want to know is what you did during the pandemic. And for me, for all of us, that took courage, it took risk. But when you do that and you're going to take that risk, it's real courage, because you have to make a plan and go A,
Agreed.
B, C.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kate. Sorry to interrupt you there, but thank you so much for those words. And it's always a privilege having you share some of those words of wisdom with us. And we can't thank you enough for the work that you and the One Young World community do to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Stay safe.
So we sometimes feel like we don't have the capacity, capability, or background to enact positive change. But today we'll be hearing from some incredible individuals that have overcome some of life's hardest challenges. Our panel today consists of some individuals that have shot the lights out and reached for their dreams. But not only that, they've made a difference in the communities in which they live and operate. So I have the privilege of introducing our panelists for tonight's panel discussion. And our first panelist is a good friend of mine, Nathaniel Jafter. Now, Nathaniel is a One Young World ambassador, chartered accountant, he's a business owner, and he enacts positive change within the community that he operates using sport through his Pro 2 to 6 Foundation. Welcome, Nathaniel. Our second panelist tonight is Dr. Masima Mabunda. Now, Dr. Masima is the head of Discovery, or head of Vitality Wellness at Discovery. Now, for those of you that know Discovery, it's probably one of the most, if not the most, innovative company to come out of South Africa in the last decade. Welcome, Dr. Masima.
Thank you.
And our third panelist tonight, coming all the way from the UK on our virtual stream, is Calm Paul Christian. Now, Calm is an investment banker at one of the UK's largest firms, or largest banks. He's a social investor, and he's also a One Young World ambassador. Welcome, Calm.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. It really is a privilege to have you all here with us. So we're going to get right into it, and you've all really overcome significant adversity to get to where you are today. So Nathaniel, I'm going to ask you to kick us off, please, by sharing your story and the lessons learned with our audience tonight.
Thanks, Mandy. So I'm Nathaniel, and I'll be as brief as possible. Just to give you some context, I grew up in a difficult neighborhood, quite violent and under-resourced. I did maths in my final year of high school, and none of my friends did maths with me. We had to walk in a group because I had to cross a large field to get onto the other side where the school was, and on the other side was a different gang. On this particular morning, to go write my final year maths exam, I walked across the field, and out of the bushes came a guy 20 meters away from me. And because I became street smart by then, I stood still and I turned around slowly. And he shouted, and I looked, and he had a gun on him. And at that point, I needed to decide, do I run or do I walk towards him? And I decided to walk towards him, and he was very aggressive in his tone, and he demanded that I hand over my watch. It was a new watch that I got for those exams. And he also wanted my bag. And I told him, look, I just want to go and write an exam. And he became even more hostile. And he took my watch, he took my bag, and then I asked him, can I at least have my calculator? And he just looked at me and he told me, I'm just trying to live a better life too. And he took it and he went. And I was quite shaken. But when you're from where I am, you're actually more embarrassed by a situation like that. And I stood there and I thought, do I continue walking? Life is so unfair. I already don't have much, and I still have to go write the biggest exam of my life. I wrote the exam. I barely scraped into Stellenbosch University. And fast forward, I did my articles with one of the big 4 companies. Again, it was a very difficult environment for me because I didn't fit in, I always felt. I was always searching for someone who looked like me, someone who had a background of struggle like I had, and someone I could really lean on. And for 2 years of articles, I was on a search for someone who could help me through this journey. And I never found them, and I left, and I realized I needed to become that person for other people. And that's who I try and be now. And that's basically my story and who I am.
Wow, Nathaniel, thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm truly left speechless, actually. I mean, I know your story, but just hearing it straight from you, it's really, really inspirational. And young kids from your area, I'm sure, look up to you so much. So thank you. Moving over to Dr. Mabunda, please can you take us through your journey and the key takeaways you want to share tonight?
Good evening, and thank you once again for having me. It's really an honor to be here. The story that I want to share came in the form of what was an exciting opportunity for my husband and I in 2008, where we had an expatriate contract to move to London for 2 years. Given that the opportunity came at a time when I was planning to do my MBA locally, I decided that I'm going to seize the opportunity, and in the 2 years that I'm in the UK, I'm going to actually study at Oxford and get my MBA there. Challenge became, at the time when we were moving, I was 7 months pregnant, and given that I didn't have the funds to do the MBA, I had to make sure that I apply in the first cycle of applications so I can apply for a scholarship. So that meant I had to do my GMAT on the due date that my son was meant to be born. Thankfully, he aligned with my plans and decided to come 3 weeks later. So I was able to get the GMAT. So I overcame that challenge. And then now that I had to go for interviews, I was exclusively breastfeeding and we didn't have a helper. Managed to convince my husband to take leave, and we all drove to Oxford. And fortunately, there's a pub right outside of Said where I had to breastfeed just before the interview. And I left my 3-month-old son with my husband to go for the interview. That went well. So second challenge went well, got accepted into Oxford. My financial plan for the MBA was a scholarship. Then the financial crisis hit. Now we've got no money and no means to actually afford this thing that I've actually worked so hard for that seemed to be coming together. But we decided that, you know what, having been raised by a single mom, having seen her overcome things where, frankly, I had no cooking clue how she did it, where every day you just wonder what's going to happen tomorrow, but somehow she always had a plan. And despite what externally looked like we were deprived, I've always felt privileged. I said, I'm going to continue and something is going to happen. So thankfully, we managed to find the capital on the second day of registration. I've asked Oxford to give me time until end of September. Thankfully, second day after registration, we managed to find the £33,000 for me to continue. So that's the third hurdle overcome. That was exciting. I wasn't going to get expelled. And then now I needed the funds to continue to study. That is close to £10,000 to £15,000 to pay for the books, and just the living expenses of studying in the MBA. Fortunately, after I got accepted, I did my exams and I practiced medicine in the UK. Then my only source of income that I could tap into at the moment was working locums after hours and on weekends. So that became my MBA life, where from Thursday night until Sunday, I would leave campus and go work and not partake in some of the social initiatives of the program. There may have been people who thought, oh, Musima is so antisocial. I didn't want to make my burdens others, and I was quite conscious to not want to be a victim in a pity case from Africa. So I worked throughout the MBA, barely saw my son. Battles to get used to the system in the UK where it's called childminders, where you leave your child with people that are registered with Ofsted, but really it's in someone's house culturally and otherwise. It's things that would not have been familiar with, but I just had to keep going because that's the only way I could go to school and my husband would go to work. And I told myself that it's a year, it will end and something will come out of it. I'm not going to say it was easy. I've switched between seeing it as an opportunity, which was the growth that came out of it. But there were moments where I would sit, and I remember this I was at Tommy's, at St. Thomas in casualty, going up to the ward where my back was killing me. And I remember wanting to cry and say, dear Lord, this better be worth it in one shape or form, because honestly, this is hard work. I don't imagine all of my classmates are going through that, but those moments were brief, but they did come. In the end, I've grown to be very grateful for that experience. It actually took a while for me to actually reflect back to see how that has shaped me into the person that I am. So what I took out of that experience, honestly, is you have more capacity than you realize. Sometimes it takes being pushed against a wall to actually realize that you have a lot more than you realize. The second thing that I took away from it is what looks like a closed door and what looks like a wall. It's actually a growth opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to show up differently and try different things. There's always a way. So I've learned that there's always a way. What looks like a closed door is not the end of the road. What looks like the edge of a cliff is not there's always a way. And because for me, completing the MBA it had to happen. There was no, I could backtrack. Every single thing that happened in that journey forced me to actually show up differently and embrace it as an opportunity for me to grow and do things differently. And in that year, I can guarantee you, with everything I've been through, I've managed to, challenging as it was, to get to the end goal, which is complete the MBA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mabunda. I mean, Lal and I are both new parents, and I think we listened to your story in just absolute awe. You really embody the grit, determination, and resilience that so many of us are looking towards, so thank you so much. We're going to cross over to Calm now. Please take us through your journey and some of the lessons you'd like to share tonight.
Yeah, sure. So I think first I'll start during the first year of my A-levels, so I was preparing my grades to go to university. I'd recently come from quite a bad school, went into special measures after I'd left, and I went to a new grammar school. It was supposed to be top in the country and was supposed to be the most supportive educational environment. And halfway through my first year at the school, I was almost kicked out of the school. Not for anything to do with my behavior or anything like that. The reason I was almost kicked out was because my grade performance was starting to slip, but actually the formal letter come for me to be threatened to be removed from school came when I changed correspondence address. So the school I went to had a very strict catchment area policy, the distance you could live from the school. And my correspondence address changed, and they sent me a formal letter to say that they were thinking about removing me from the school. No one investigated with me why my correspondence address changed, why my grades were going down. I didn't speak to my form tutors, I didn't speak to an admissions officer or anyone. I just received a letter through the door. If they had investigated, which they later had to do, they found out that actually the reason that I had moved address is because the area where I grew up was quite heavily gang populated. And to cut a long story short, one day I came home from school and there were 3 bullet holes in my mother's car. And there was an intervention from the local police and the council, and I was eventually forced to relocate to a whole other borough, which was about an hour and a half away from the school I was traveling to. So naturally my grades started to slip. I was temporarily relocated, living with my father, who lived closer to the school in the catchment area, until that family home was burnt down as well, and I was forced to relocate again to another location outside of the school's catchment area. So that caused a lot of disruption to my studies, and there wasn't a lot of support from the school. And I felt quite alone, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen with my education. Fast forward, I ended up resitting my exams, and I got an unconditional offer to study at Oxford University, and 3 years later I graduated from Oxford. Which brings me to the next challenge that I had. Whilst I was at Oxford, I had a lot of challenging experiences with tutors who didn't necessarily see my academic potential in the same way that I did. And in my last year of university, I had to write 5 exam papers that all accounted for my final grade. And at that same time, I found out that I was going to be a father. I now have a 4-year-old daughter, but at the time, it was very unexpected, and I panicked. So in addition to studying all day and all night for my exams, I started to study more days and more nights to start looking at applications and jobs, looking at something I could do in banking. Originally, I was going to be a history teacher, but I thought, I needed to make money for my family. Cut a long story short, again, eventually I did graduate from university with my 2-1. I did get an offer from Rothschild Investment Bank in the M&A team there, which was one of the most prestigious offers I could have got at that time. And I thought that all my problems were solved. And then I started at the investment bank, actually. And the first day of being on the job after training, I got the phone call to say that my daughter's mother was going into labor. So I had to leave the office there in the middle of a senior client meeting, and I went straight to the hospital to watch her give birth. And that was it was a very tough week. I remember they only gave me 5 days off for paternity leave, and when my daughter was 8 days old, I wasn't aware that as a junior banker, you're not supposed to have a life, you're not supposed to have a lunch break or anything. So I made the mistake of leaving the office for 15 minutes to travel to home, spent half an hour with my daughter and her mother. I didn't eat anything. 15 minutes to come back, and I came back to a really passive-aggressive post-it note on my monitor screen saying where was I dropped the ball, I should be doing things, and some really aggressive emails. And this kind of culture continued. To one point, I just broke, and I was like, this isn't the environment for me. I'm not good at my job. I can't be a banker. I can't deal with these people. And eventually, I quit. Now, 3 years later, I'm back in investment banking. I'm same seniority level I would have been if I'd never left. I've actually been identified as one of the future leaders of the investment bank, and I'm thriving in a role that I thought that I couldn't do. So what would be my 3 key takeaways from that? I would say the first thing is you shouldn't expect people to be committed to understanding your situation. Not to say that people or the world is against you, but who have natural privileges natural blind spots of privilege that look like, people are not necessarily going to be looking to understand everything that's going on behind the scenes for you. So you have to be prepared to speak and demand what you do. The second thing I learned that is in times of crisis, you have to be even more discerning about the decisions that you make, and you shouldn't make panic decisions. And it's quite relevant today. I wasn't ready to jump into the bank when I did. I grew up without finances. I grew up without the paternal role model that I thought that I needed. And I thought that was going to solve all my problems. I'd become a banker, be present with the family, and buy everything they needed. What I needed at that time actually was a stable job, one that understood me, one that gave me space to find my feet with my family as well. And the last thing that I would say is that you have to learn to fail fast and fail quickly and just keep pivoting and learn from those experiences. Because despite the missteps that I made during those periods, and despite the fact I can be reflective now and say maybe I shouldn't have done banking when I did, although I love it now and I'm thriving in it now, I failed. I always took learning points from I had and used it to platform me. I would say those are the 3 key takeaways I have.
Perfect, thanks, Colm. And I'm sure the stories that you guys have shared resonates with so many people that are tuning in today. And I think it's key to understand that for all 3 of you, your past and what you were going through in your present surely definitely didn't define your future. I think the question on my mind is, you went through all these challenges. How did that shape you into the leader that you are today? And Nathaniel, let's start with you.
Thanks for starting with me, Lau. Yeah, so how did it shape me? COVID came, a lockdown came. Just before lockdown, we hired someone new. We were renovating one of the businesses, and we were invested in something pretty significant. When COVID started and the lockdowns came, everything fell flat. It was devastating. However, those experiences I just mentioned to you kind of helped me because I've been there before. I've had very little before. I've been in seemingly hopeless situations before. Basically, I've been refined. So I am going to look back at this and I'm going to say again, how did I survive that? And it's a common thing that happens in my life, and it is a thing that will happen in many people's lives. It's just, I guess, making peace with it and accepting that life is a journey and you go through these seasons and you will get knocked, but you always somehow get out of it. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's the true epitome of resilience. Dr. Mabunda, let me hand over to you, and maybe you can tell us how your experiences and life experiences have changed you to become the good leader that you are today.
So for me, two things stand out from my past experiences. One is the art of the possible. Given what I've been through and seeing what I've had to overcome, I now believe in the art of the possible. And I actually now thrive on problem solving, and I enjoy it because I see these experiences as opportunities for me to thrive and grow. So that's one. The second thing that I took out of it is empathy. Trying to create psychologically safe spaces because everyone is going through something. So it's a lot more important now, given what I've been through, for me to be proactively empathetic of the team and try to create spaces where they feel psychologically safe so that regardless of what they're going through, they're able to give the best of what they can to the team.
I definitely agree. I think in this difficult time, empathy is something that all leaders should embrace. Let me pass over to Com in the UK. Would you mind telling us about how your experiences shaped the leader that you are today?
Yes, sure. Actually, for work, I recently had to get a review from people how they would describe my leadership style, and some of the words surprised me, some I was more used to. So the four words that were used were patient, fearless, again empathetic, as was mentioned, and platforming of others, which was more interesting to me. In terms of patience, I work in quite a high pressured industry, can be described as competitive, cutthroat at times. But usually when certain things are happening, I tend to be quite unfazed. I make jokes. I'm usually the one to calm situations. And I think that's because all the things I've experienced in life growing up, a lot of things now seem more trivial to me. And unless something is, threatening my physical person, it doesn't really strike me in the same way that the stress seems to strike other people. The fearless part, I think, whilst I have a high tolerance for those types of behaviors, I'm also very high in my standards, and I'm happy to assert them with anybody, whether it's senior people or not, in terms of what I expect in the workplace and how I expect to be treated. And I don't have any fear about losing my job or anything like that now because, one, I'm confident in my skills, that's how I got here, but also because, we've come from lower things, so there's nothing really to drop to in that. The other point of fearless, more positive point actually, is having the confidence to reach out to people and ask questions or take the whole chance, regardless of what happens. Actually, tomorrow I have a meeting with the new CEO who was just recently appointed, and there's more senior people than me that have struggled to get FaceTime with him recently, but I saw the opportunity, I asked the question, and he put some time in the diary for immediately. So I think that level of fearlessness is part of leadership. Empathy, I won't touch on too much, because key points have been touched on, but whenever I speak with my juniors, whenever something goes wrong, I try to sit down and find out, what's going on at home, what's happening with them before I jump to any conclusions. In finance, people are really quite strict to hand out consequences and repercussions because of, regulatory concerns and things. But I think people rarely make mistakes or do bad things because they're lazy. Usually there's something going in the background. It's just asked, if you would have understood and you can help them. But I think the final point around platforming others is the most important point to me, because growing up, there wasn't necessarily equal access to opportunities, and people often took up spaces that they could have given opportunities to other people. So what I always try to do is give people the appropriate credit in public and in private, and also try to present them with opportunities that they can showcase that to others, because that would help. People did that for me, and that's how I got to where I am.
Thank you so much. Listening to all of your stories, it almost seems like there is a silver lining to adversity. But of course, no one would actually choose adversity. So knowing what you know now and how it did mold you into the person you are today, though, what would you do if you were given the opportunity to say something to your 15-year-old self? Come, Nathaniel, tell us what's on your mind.
Well, my 15-year-old self, the first thing I would tell them is, you're going to meet ex-NBA players, so get excited. So that's really cool. But on a serious note, I tell my 15-year-old self that you are so special. And I'd also tell them to stop trying to figure everything out about the future. There's even 25-year-olds watching this now who's trying to plan every step of the way and not living in the moment, and taking for granted the people who are in front of them right now. I would live today. I would tell them to live today, because the people who need you are there now, and you need to help now. And also that your inheritance is already there for you. You just need to claim it and stop worrying. That's something I would definitely tell my 15-year-old self.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. Over to Dr. Mabunda. I'm not sure if you knew what was in your path or if you wanted to be a doctor back then, but what would you say to your younger self?
The first thing I will say is you are enough. Do not doubt yourself. You are more than enough and you have what it takes to solve that which is in front of you. The second thing that I will say to my 15-year-old self is embrace that which makes you unique. I like saying to my kids that it's easy when you're a rose and somehow you are planted in a field full of lilies and there's no rose, that to think there's something wrong with you because you've got thorns, etc. Embrace those unique points because that's your source of strength and that closely aligns with the biggest contribution you will make. So do not shy away from that. And related to the 2 points is you belong. Growing up in South Africa, the apartheid, the inequality, etc., I grew up feeling easily that I didn't belong in so many spaces, but you actually realize that you belong. You don't need anyone's permission, and no one needs to recognize it. You definitely belong.
Thank you so much. Calm, how about you? You sound like you really were having a tough time at that specific age. What would you say to your younger self?
I think if I could meet my younger self, actually, I'd give myself a book on mastery. I'm sure there are many out there, but when I read Far Too Late, it was Robert Greene's book on mastery. I'd tell myself that the sooner you learn discipline, and I mean that in terms of application of work, studies, family, romantic relationships, your community commitment, self-development, whatever it is, the sooner you learn self-discipline, the better your life will be. And you should be prepared that as you enter that journey of self-discipline and trying to reach certain milestones, some people might not understand what you're doing. Even yourself, sometimes you might start to self-doubt and you might have fear of missing out. There's other places you want to spend your money or your time. But if you've really done that work of self-mastery and introspection, you can be much more comfortable in committing to decisions that you've made about what you want for yourself in your life. And I'm not saying stick to that. You have to be ready to pivot and change tack, like I mentioned. But that's one thing I would say. And then I would tell myself that is more relevant to me as I've gotten older, that as you start to make decisions and you give these what people may consider success points, and other people start to recognize, don't fall into the trap of believing that you made it, and don't fall in the trap of believing that you always have something valuable to say. Sometimes you'll be asked to be platformed for things because of the visibility you have or the connections that you have or whatever else, but you should really have the humility to pass it on to other people when you're not the right fit or if it's not the right time for you or you have a focus on. You always have 2 or 3 people that you can recommend to do something in place of you. And people actually start to trust you more because if you can pass on when things do arise that maybe you weren't the first thought for, but you can see that that's the direction you want to step in and you approach people in relation to those things, they'll be much more open to giving you those opportunities because they trust that you only engage with things when you genuinely feel you're adding value. So I would just round off by saying, be very disciplined about where you want to get to, and once you think you've got there, be disciplined about how you use that position as well.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And to all our younger viewers tuning in, I think these are some good lessons to take into your future and your next steps forward. I think for some of us, the power of hindsight is very powerful. And having learned these lessons before, we would have probably been a lot better people. At registration, we did ask the audience to send us some questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get through every single one of them, but we've handpicked a few to ask some of our panelists today. So our first question, Nathaniel, I'm going to start with you. Our first question comes from Jason in Cape Town. Did you ever feel inadequate as a young person or young professional coming from the Cape Flats?
All the time, Jason. I felt I didn't belong. I felt out of place often. I didn't look like everyone else. I wasn't used to dressing the way everyone else did, and my accent wasn't as eloquent as everyone else's, which gave the perception that I was inferior, but I thought like that of myself. And an old white guy told this black life that you are a ray of God's own light. You are a manifestation of Him on earth, and you are just supposed to go and be you and be confident in you. And that gave me so much confidence. That's why I love older people. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is from Masaka, and it's directed at Dr. Mabunda. She would like to know, what role do you feel that mental health and emotional intelligence played in your ability to respond to adversity?
So I'll start with the clinical response to that. There's definitely published research that demonstrate that if you look after your well-being, you adopt a healthy lifestyle, you put your body in a position to withstand any shocks that may come your way. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you invest in doing the right things to make sure you're healthy. Having said that, the way I have learned to grow and view resilience is it's a way of life, and it's a way that you interact with the experiences that life throws at you. It is when in that moment you choose to respond or engage from a place of fear, because that takes you one path and then stress and tension build, or whether when life presents experiences to you, you engage from a place of faith, if you're a Christian like me, or from a place of growth. So once I've started applying that life, which was obviously post MBA, I find that there's very little to recover from, because in that moment, I see life's experiences as opportunities for me to show up differently and grow. And then there's very little tension that builds up. So there's definitely the health aspect of looking after your physical body so that it can carry you through. But there's also how you approach life and how you engage with life that allows you to not carry a lot of tension and stress.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Our next question is from Emma Bell in the UK, who is also the co-chair of the UK task force. And Emma's question is to you, Com. So we find ourselves in a difficult situation, and what advice do you have for those people who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19, and what advice would you give them to trying new opportunities?
Yeah, it's a great question. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that the climate is really hard, and with or without COVID, it was really hard, and we might expect to see things get harder. So, not to be too hard on ourselves is the first thing. Well, I'm not going to give a talk about keeping your head up and a meritocratic society and eventually your talent will come through, because that is also a lie. But I'm also not going to say that, resilience is the answer. Wake up at 10 a.m., send 50 applications by 5 p.m., expect 50 rejections, just be resilient. After 2 weeks, you get your dream job, and rejections are not about you, because that's also a lie as well. I think in any application you do for anything, whether it's, you're looking for a new job, whether it's you're looking to win a new client, whether you provide a service, you're looking for a new contract, 100% it should be about you, and it should be about your client or the company. I'll focus on companies because maybe it's more relevant to the context, but I think every application you do, you should be spending time tailoring it to every situation. You shouldn't be copying and pasting and just changing the name and then forgetting to change the name in some situations, forgetting to change the reference here and there. I personally, I wouldn't apply to more than one company a day, and I would spend the whole day applying to it, sometimes even 2. I would make sure I go and do the research, research the company, look on the website, look on Google, look on the news, look at the company records for finance, whatever else, to try and see what trajectory the business is going in, even if it's even a healthy company that you want to be a part of. Look at new product launches, look at new hires that signify the direction that the business is going in, look at acquisitions, any strategies they publish in annual reports, presentations, any charitable work they publish on their blogs. All of these things, you should be tailoring your CV very specifically to those companies each and every time. And you should also be making sure you do that with your cover letters as well. So your cover letter should show you understand the company and you understand how you fit with the company. Your CV should really do that as well. A lot of times people forget this element where you're applying for a law firm, you should have language in your CV around drafting and proofing. If you're applying for a bank, you should have analysis, quantification, accounting, statistics, auditability, all that type of stuff. And I think the more you familiarize yourself with the language of the industry or the sector, the more you can look familiar to the recruiter or to the hirer that you actually belong in that space and that sector as well. And I genuinely think if you do this, you're more likely to get 3 out of 5 hit rate applying for 5 places a week than you are applying for 350 and getting 1 after some time. So that's what I'd recommend, just for CV specific.
Thank you all so much for your time tonight. You've been incredible, and it's widely known that time is our greatest asset. So we're so appreciative to all of you for giving us some of yours.
And I just want to give a bit of a thanks to our viewers tonight, and specifically to Walton, Christian, Dixon, Paul, and Sadie. Keep those comments coming and keep those messages coming through in our comments and in the chat. It's great to have this interactive session with all of you.
Definitely, and we will do our best, as we said earlier, to get back to you through all the institutes after the session. We are now going to move into some of the videos that we spoke about at the beginning of the show. Please remember to get involved in any way you can. If it's sharing it on social media or donating, all funds will be directed towards communities in South Africa that desperately need these goods and services. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Esther Marshall and I am a proud One Young World Ambassador and also the author of the children's book Sophie Says I Can, I Will. I wrote this book after becoming a first-time mum about 20 months ago and realising that the books out there really didn't have the empowering messages and life lessons that I wanted my son to learn. And so the impact that I want this book and the following books in the series to have is that children believe that regardless of gender, race, religion or any background, that they can achieve their dreams and everybody should have an equal opportunity. I really hope that the messages within the book, so this one, Sophie Says I Can, I Will, the next one, Sophie Says It's Okay Not to Be Okay, and the one after, Sophie Says Be Proud of Who You Are, that children take these through their childhood and build their resilience with these mantras, and then can take it into adulthood and build the resilience that we need in life to be an adult in today's society. That's what I really hope for children that we're speaking to about the book. What we're doing in campaign is asking people to donate to Stand Tall, a charity that helps children get through if they've been bullied, and be able to donate these books to vulnerable children and children who have been bullied to help them get through that and go into schools and teach them about this. I think the link will be sent to you. I really hope that this is something that rings true to you all and that you're passionate about. And if anybody wants to reach out and ask more, please do. I really appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Esther, and it is never too early to start building that positive mindset. This series would not have been possible without the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And I think this is just testament that professionals and professional bodies alike have the power to instill a positive mindset and enact positive change. I'm joined in studio today by the CEO of SAICA and also a board member for Chartered Accountants Worldwide, Mr. Freeman Mvalo. Freeman, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Lyle. Thanks for that introduction. We at SAICA are very, very proud to be associated with One Young World and Chartered Accountants Worldwide on this FinBiz 2030 initiative. We think it is an initiative whose time has come. It's an initiative that we think requires leadership and requires all of the young people to engage in and lead us into the future. The future belongs to them after all. As I begin to make my few comments for today, I want to just go back into the quotation by Niccolo Machiavelli. He said these words many, many years ago. He says there's nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. And what FinBiz 2030 is about, and what One Young World and the Chartered Accountants Worldwide is challenging us to do, and creating an opportunity for young people to do, is to do just that, to introduce something that's going to create sustainability for our world. The universe is facing challenges due to technological changes as well as environmental changes that we need to respond to. And in doing this, the young people that are going to be engaged in these initiatives, the first thing they bring as an important tool is themselves. And it's important that as they bring themselves, they understand themselves better, because if they understand themselves better, they will be able to lead us and drive these changes more successfully. And to do so, there's a few things you need to think about yourself. One is that you've been very successful up until this point, and some of that success is an important asset that you require going forward. But also it could be a liability. Liability in the sense that you get to value certain things, you get to value certain ways of working, value certain ways of behaving, and in valuing some of those things, some of the skills you may require to drive the change at the moment may require that you adjust some of those things, may require that you challenge some of the thinking that you have. But most importantly, it may require that you challenge some of the thinking of the people around you that you are loyal to in one way or the other. And in order to do that, you've got to engage in courageous conversations with them. You need to begin to define the new world for them and make them expect that you will not always act the same way you've acted in the past. And in the process, also remember that some of the DNA that you bring into the equation is necessary for the change that you need to drive. And excuse me, as you drive this change, you are going to face new challenges. COVID-19 has presented the world with the challenges that it has never faced before. We've had to make decisions. Policymakers have had to take decisions that are difficult, that are going to inflict pain on people. There's a lot of unemployment that has happened as a result of this, but the decisions that have been taken were necessary to be taken. So in the space that you're going to be operating in driving the change that you need to drive, you're going to need new skills because you're facing something you've never faced before. Therefore, you need to create a structured way of learning and challenging the learning and challenging the learning opportunities that you face, reframe the truths. Some of the things that you might face might be difficult, you might have challenges, you might have some failures along the way. You shouldn't regard them as failures, regard them as opportunities to advance and learn. And you need to take tough decisions at times. I've already referred to the fact that some of the decisions that have had to be taken is lockdown, and with lockdown comes a lot of difficulties that society is facing, but it's necessary. It's necessary to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Without those decisions, we would not see the progress that we've seen in the European countries. Unfortunately, some countries have resisted this change, and as a result, again, you can see the consequences in those countries. So you need to fall in love with making tough decisions. Accept that you are not going to always agree with the people that you agreed with before. Accept that nothing ever stays the same. Things are forever changing, and it's important that you move on. As you engage in all of these things, there will be times when it's difficult. There will be times when you feel like you're facing an uphill. Give yourself permission to fail. You're dealing with things that you've never dealt with before. President Obama, when he took office in 2009, it was just immediately after the 2008 financial crisis. And there were a number of policies that he introduced, and some of those policies he had to forego. So you experiment. You begin to try new things. You give yourself the opportunity to fail and make progress. But in order to do that, you need to train yourself while you still have an opportunity. Try by all means to engage in those things that are going to give you space to experiment, to make those little failures, make the adjustments, and build the stamina and the stomach for the change that you need to build, as the world that you're going to be facing is going to be difficult. If you do all of these things, the whole notion of building resilience will become second nature to you, and you will be able to engage courageously and lead the world into the new and sustainable environment that we all long for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freeman. And I like what you say. We definitely have to fall in love with the tough decisions. It is a trying time. We're going to get into the next video that Mandy alluded to earlier. It's just another video about some people that are doing good things, and it's just something for us to take advantage of and for us to take an example of.
The action we are taking now will have lasting economic costs. But we are convinced that the cost of not acting now will be far much greater.
My name is Mweleji Mapedu, a trainee chartered accountant at Mercedes-Benz South Africa. I'm also a founder of a non-profit organization called Rampahlele Homecoming, which seeks to eradicate poverty through impactful and sustainable projects targeted at rural communities. COVID-19 is a global concern, which leaves us with a lot of uncertainty about the future. And although all of us have been negatively impacted, our first instinct was to assist the most vulnerable when the president announced the nationwide lockdown to combat the spread of the coronavirus. Thus far, we have assisted over 1,000 households in 30 villages with food parcels, over 15 schools with personal protective equipment for learners who have returned to school, and personal protective equipment for the elderly and those suffering from chronic illnesses, as they are the most likely to succumb to the virus. We have done all of this with donations as little as 20 rands from individuals. We believe that we are the change that we want to see in this world. And it is for this reason that we ask you to play your part in supporting our cause to ensure that people in the most forgotten parts of this country are seen, thought of, and cared for during this pandemic. Thank you for heeding the call to saving humanity during these trying times. Thank you for preserving the dignity of the rural child.
Thank you so much to Esther and Concelia for sharing your projects with us. Both physical and mental health are equally important, and we really hope that you get involved in supporting those two projects in any way as we can. For anyone that does donate to Sophie Says, please remember to click in the comments box and leave your comment that says South Africa so that we can ensure that all the books come to our shores and are distributed accordingly. Now, we're very lucky, Kate has hung around and we have a few extra minutes. I certainly feel richer for every moment I get with her. So Kate, welcome back. We'd love to hear some more of your thoughts.
Back at you, Mandy. It's me who's getting richer listening to you guys. Honestly, Lala and Mandy, everybody involved, well done for some fabulous content. I mean, from Freeman there, an absolute masterclass lesson in courage in your life and your profession. That speech that Freeman just said, so eloquent. That's a masterclass. You can put that up, go through it every day and try to learn it. What I thought was fantastic demonstrations of courage, exactly what I was talking about, is the depth to which Nathaniel and Lyle and Dr. Mabunda went into, Nathaniel and Calm went into in themselves to draw out of themselves a spirit and a thing that maybe they didn't know that they had. And the way they've thought about it and were plainly thinking in the moment, using that thinking, making a plan, putting one foot in front of the other. That's where courage is this longer, deeper thing maybe than bravery in the instant of the moment. You have to, as Freeman says, you have to think about what you're doing. You have to plan. You have to try. Maybe you have to fail. But this is courage, and I thought those examples of courage from everybody who spoke were just great. And I thought, listening to the three panelists, I really want to go back and listen to all of that again, because that is stuff you could use every single day. And I think in this time of COVID, we certainly at One Young World have had to draw on courage to launch the COVID-19 fund, to quickly get those funds out to ambassadors on the front line, to launch the One Young World Academy, to ask of ourselves more than we thought we had. But when I look at all of you, and I look at the young chartered accountants worldwide, again, I'm not left in doubt. Your courage is absolutely awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kate. We're so appreciative of you again. So to head into some wrap-ups, I think that, although none of us would naturally pick adversity, as we said, sometimes adversity and facing a crisis is exactly what pushes us to overcome these self-inflicted limitations we may have, because we simply have no other choice. And then all of a sudden, we're able to achieve more than we ever thought was possible. So let's just take a moment, and as terrible as things may seem right now and as daunting as they definitely are, and we'd never want to discredit that, let's take a moment to realize that the pandemic is actually providing us with an opportunity to reset the rules of the game and to create the type of world that we actually want to live in. So let's try, build up some courage, lean in, and create a better world for generations to come.
Yeah, 100% agree, Mandy, and I must say that I'm certainly left inspired, and I hope all of you are too. I also want to encourage each and every one of you to get involved with FinBiz 2030. And if there's any way that you want to get involved, please feel free to reach out, whether it be to join some of the projects that we're working on or to even partner up. I also want to take this time to thank our teams at Chartered Accountants Worldwide, at SAICA, at Big Top Multimedia, and at A1 for putting this event together today. Now, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is a mammoth task, which can only be achieved if we work together in unison. So I implore all of you, let's get together and work together to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you so much.